Episode number 11. The weather was dull on Sunday. Kay was very tired, as he had stayed out drinking until late in the night celebrating with some of the regulars, and he had almost overslept. He dressed hurriedly, without the time to think, and assemble the various plans he had worked out during the week. With no breakfast, he rushed to the suburb he had been told about. Oddly enough, although he had little time to look around him, he came across the three bank officials involved in his case, Rabensteiner, Kalic and Kaminer. The first two were traveling in a tram that went across K.'s road, but Kaminer sat on the terrace of a cafe, and leant curiously over the wall as K came over. All of them seemed to be looking at him, surprised at seeing their superior running. It was a kind of pride that made K want to go on foot. This was his affair, and the idea of help from strangers, however slight, was repulsive to him. He also wanted to avoid asking for anyone's help because that would initiate them into the affair even, if only slightly. And after all, he had no wish at all to humiliate himself before the committee by being too punctual. Anyway, now he was running so that he would get there by 9 o'clock, if at all possible, even though he had no appointment for this time. He had thought that he would recognize the building from a distance by some kind of sign, without knowing exactly what the sign would look like, or from some particular kind of activity outside the entrance. Kay had been told that the building was in Juliusstrasse, but when he stood at the street's entrance it consisted on each side of almost nothing, but monotonous, grey constructions, tall blocks of flats occupied by poor people. Now, on a Sunday morning, most of the windows were occupied. Men in their shirt sleeves leant out smoking, or carefully and gently held small children on the sills. Other windows were piled up with bedding, above which the disheveled head of a woman would briefly appear. People called out to each other across the street. One of the calls provoked a loud laugh about Kay himself. It was a long street, and spaced evenly along it were small shops below street level, selling various kinds of foodstuffs, which you reached by going down a few steps. Women went in and out of them, or stood chatting on the steps. A fruitmonger, taking his goods up to the windows, was just as inattentive as Kay and nearly knocked him down with his cart. Just then, a gramophone, which in better parts of town would have been seen as note, began to play some murderous tune. Kay went further into the street, slowly, as if he had plenty of time now, or as if the examining magistrate were looking at him from one of the windows, and therefore knew that Kay had found his way there. It was shortly after 9. The building was quite far down the street. It covered so much area it was almost extraordinary, and the gateway in particular was tall and long. It was clearly intended for delivery wagons belonging to the various warehouses all around the yard, which were now locked up, and carried the names of companies, some of which Kay knew from his work at the bank. In contrast with his usual habits, he remained standing a while at the entrance to the yard taking in all these external details. Near him, there was a barefooted man sitting on a crate, and reading a newspaper. There were two lads swinging on a hand cart. In front of a pump stood a weak, young girl in a beige jacket who, as the water flowed into her can, looked at Kay. There was a piece of rope stretched between two windows in a corner of the yard, with some washing hanging on it to dry. A man stood below it calling out instructions to direct the work being done.